opposition.
For 8 years, this Prime Minister and NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost. He said that he was taking on all this debt so that Canadians wouldn't have to. Well, now we learn that Canadians are spending more on household debt interest than at any time in Canadian history, more than the American families were during the 2008 financial crisis that almost brought down the global economy. Will the Prime Minister reverse the inflationary high-tax policies that have indebted Canadians and driven up their interest rates?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The audacity of this Conservative leader knows no bounds.
Right.
Just last week, he voted against a national school food program, and now he rises to talk about affordability.
That's right.
Let's be clear. This Conservative leader has no long-term vision for this country, with or without glasses. It takes more than a couple of bags of McDonald's to feed Canadians. That's why we're going to continue to step up and be there with investments for Canadians, while he talks about cuts and austerity and then goes and votes for cuts and austerity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians can't even afford to feed themselves a couple of bags of McDonald's after 8 years of this Prime Minister taxing their food. Speaking of food, you know the only problem with his school food framework? It doesn't fund any food. Right. It funds politicians to talk with bureaucrats who talk with lobbyists about establishing a conversation towards consulting. It funds bureaucracy and not families. So speaking of one way he can make food more affordable for everyone, including our kids, will he pass Bill C-234, the common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we've seen exactly why. Whatever his justifications, they have chosen to vote against initiatives there to help Canadians. Whether it's dental support for hundreds of thousands of kids that we've already brought in, with more support for seniors, they chose to vote against months ago, Mr. Speaker. They're continuing to step up and vote against the programs that matter. And while they seem not to care about climate change and want to sit back and watch the world burn, they're actually going to watch Canadians' food sources burn as well.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There's so much of these guys today.
Burning a hole
So much.
in the pockets of Canadians. We voted against his plan to quadruple the carbon tax, a tax on heat, gas, and groceries. Now, the Prime Minister, when I raised the cost of $100,000 for one farm in my riding, which will rise to $400,000, I said, will he call the family and find out and tell them how they're going to pay the tax? He said he would reach out to them. He would have a conversation about how they're going to pay a $400,000 carbon tax bill. Can he tell the House what he told that family about how they're going to come up with $400 grand in more taxes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the price on pollution is a key part of actually making things more affordable for the long term for Canadians by pushing and encouraging innovation. Indeed, our departments reached out to that farm family, to that very successful large mushroom farm in the member opposite's riding, to talk about the programs we have that can move off of their dependence on fossil fuels. We know there's work to do. We know there are investments to make, but that, Mr. Speaker, is how we fight climate change and build a better future. We have a plan to fight climate change. They have no plan because they don't even recognize that climate change is real.
Okay, now, later on, he's going to acknowledge that there was some success in the Stephen Harper plan. And he's not going to be able to use that line anymore.
Just last week, the cut-and-gut Conservatives voted no to funding community housing.
Jenny Kwan's 56.
Keep delaying critical funding to
good,
build affordable homes. The housing minister says he wants to draw inspiration from what Canada did in wartime to fix the housing crisis. A catalog is not going to cut it. Part of that effort involved a national rent control initiative. Will the Prime Minister bring forward rent control to curb sky-high rent?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've shown a consistent willingness and desire to work with the provinces in areas of their jurisdiction in cooperative ways, and we are going to continue to, including on the issue of rent control. But there's not just one way to approach the housing crisis. It's something that we're doing on many fronts. So not just the catalogue, but indeed we're building more apartments and co-ops by removing the GST on construction. We're eliminating barriers to get more homes built faster by working directly with cities. And we're helping Canadians save up for a home with the First Home Savings Account. I know there's more to do, and we're going to continue to work with all governments to take bold action to tackle housing affordability.
Bold action, indeed.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Minister didn't answer my question about the Carlton mushroom farms, which faces a $400,000 carbon tax bill when the Prime Minister is done quadrupling the tax. When we spoke about this on November the 29th, he said that he looks forward to hearing the sustainable practices that the farm has put in place. Well, I can tell him I helped the farm actually get natural gas to its in order to power some of its operations, which is a lower emitting form of energy. But they're still going to face a massive tax increase. How will the Prime Minister advise the farm to pay it? By raising prices on Canadians or shutting down production and bringing in more foreign food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for farms across this country that are shifting towards natural gas and lower emitting ways of heating and using their various machinery, that is something that we have put in place significant programs to help them with, and that is something we are going to continue to do because it's part of our plan to both fight climate change and build a net zero economy of the future.
Net zero.
We have a plan, Mr. Speaker.
Eating bugs.
The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan to fight climate change. Indeed, they think we should be backing off on all the things we're doing and instead of continuing to fight climate change and grow a strong economy.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Prime Minister is backing off the things he's doing. Ironically, he's the one that brought in a temporary pause because his caucus was revolting regarding home heating oil. But my question was about the Medeiros Carlton mushroom farm. He claims that he's got government programs to help farmers use more natural gas at the same time as he's quadrupling the tax on natural gas, which perhaps is the reason why Canada ranks 58th out of 64 when it comes to climate index performance. Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have a climate plan, he has a tax plan, so how will he advise the Medeiros farm to pay the $400,000 bill he's sending them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Trudeau gets himself trapped
Mr.
here.
Speaker, we recognize that climate change is a reality. We recognize that we need to help families and businesses across this country reduce their emissions and continue to prosper and grow in a world where the cost of inaction on climate change is increasing exponentially. That is why we have put in place programs.
His hair's all messed up.
Programs to support
I'm not one to
Canadians,
talk, but
indeed,
like,
to get off home heating oil, for example, and transform into heat pumps. These are things that we are doing as part of our plan. The Conservatives have no plan.
That's right.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our plan is to bring home production back to Canadian farms, Mr. Speaker. His plan raises a carbon tax on a greenhouse in my riding, which meant that their produce is more expensive in the village of Manotick than a Mexican tomato is in the village of Manotick, sending a price signal for consumers to buy the tomato that had to be transported by truck and train, burning fossil fuels right across the continent. Why doesn't he axe the tax so that we can bring down the cost of farm production and bring home more clean, green Canadian produce?
None of the carbon tax is making sense these days, right? Like, it didn't make sense before it happened, but now we see it.
The
feel
price on pollution is simple. Activities that cause pollution cost a bit more, but most Canadians get more money back than what they pay, with checks being sent to Canadians every few months. Big industry pays more than the regular Canadian because industry pollutes more, and as a result, they have an incentive to reduce their pollution. The ideologically driven MAGA Conservatives are calling for pollution to be free again, and for the government to take those regular checks to Canadians away from them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Everything he just said is factually wrong. One, industry doesn't pay the carbon tax. They have a carbon tax carve-out. And as for him claiming that people get more back in rebates, the Carleton mushroom farms will pay $100,000 this year, rising to $400,000 over the carbon tax increase the Prime Minister proposes. And he's sending them tiny rebate checks to their household mailbox. Is he committing today that he's going to send a $400,000 rebate to this family farm?
Right.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Justin's going to just start getting beat up
We are
now.
there to support families, but multi-million-dollar
This is it. This is it. Now he's trapping himself.
That are successful will be continued to encourage to look for ways to use their machinery and to heat their produce in ways that is lower emitting. That's what fighting climate change is all about. It's encouraging successful farms like the Medeiros family farm to continue to be successful, but to do so in ways that reduce their emissions. We know it cannot ever be free to pollute again, despite what the Conservative Party wants.
Listen to what he's saying. Like, I just want Canadians to see this. Like, so they can judge for themselves.
Mexican producers to almost free. They have a tiny, tiny little carbon tax, not even comparable to the $400,000 tax bill that this Prime Minister is proposing. So what is he's saying is that there should be a price signal for Canadians to buy more expensive, polluting foreign food, while we, with the 5th biggest supply of arable land on planet Earth, shut our farmers down. How does that make any sense?
The Right
Doesn't
Honourable Prime
make
Minister.
sense, I don't think.
More than just anyone else in this country, farmers understand how important it is to protect the land for future generations, to pass on the bounty to their children and grandchildren of a great, important job that feeds the rest of us. That is why farmers are so focused on the future, and that is why we are there to support them with a plan and investments that helps them reduce their emissions while they continue to put food on all our tables. We have a plan for that. The Conservative Party refuses to even admit that there needs to be work done to reduce emissions. That is not the way to build a future. Not in Carleton, not anywhere.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims that, actually he stated correctly, that farmers are working hard to protect the environment, which is why it's so strange that he wants to punish them with a tax that on one farm alone costs $100,000, that will rise to $400,000 for the crime of using the only source of energy that is available to that farm. So I'll ask the same question I've asked him now about half a dozen times. When he finally gets around to talking to Carleton mushroom farms, how will he advise them to pay their forthcoming $400,000 carbon tax bill? By raising prices on Canadians or by cutting back and bringing in more dirty foreign food?
Dirty foreign food.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Good job.
Mr. Speaker,
Good job.
97% of farm
not true.
fuel emissions
That's not true.
are exempt from the price on pollution. The average farm across this country pays a little less than $1,000 on natural gas emissions through the price on pollution. So one can only imagine how much natural gas this successful mushroom farm must be using for their cost of the price on pollution to be that large. And we will
He doesn't
happily
understand.
work with them to switch towards a lower emitting approach to doing their business well and protecting future generations.
You can tell he has no idea what he's talking about there, but he's talking.
The Honourable Member.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Last night at committee, the hand-picked Liberal chair of this Prime Minister's billion-dollar green
It's gonna
slush
go
fund
out of hands
was
here in a
exposed as
little
having used
while,
staff
guys,
at the
couple
fund
minutes.
to round up $10 million for her project that had been deemed ineligible. And then she literally ran out of the committee, shutting off the cameras because she didn't want to answer any more questions. This NDP Liberal government failed to protect taxpayers from embezzlers and swindlers to the tune of $150 million. After 8 years, this Prime Minister isn't worth that cost. When will Canadians get back their missing millions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What do you guys think of Mike Barrett?
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Innovation has
pretty
already
sharp.
accepted the resignation of the CEO and chair. When allegations are made and issues arise, it's both appropriate and necessary
Liberals are
for
so
there to
dead
be
today.
a review of the matter. Those investigations and reviews are currently underway, and we look forward to the results of those investigations.
Look at Anita Anand. She looks like she's going to fall
Leeds,
asleep.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it's going to be more
Watch
in-depth
Anita
than the
Anand.
whitewash investigation that this Prime Minister and his minister put forward. They're under investigation by the Auditor General, 2 conflict of interest and ethics commissioner investigations. Their board chair, his hand-picked chair, resigned in disgrace along with the CEO. The Prime Minister was handing out millions after his minister knew that his insiders had their hand in the cookie jar, taking $150 million taxpayer dollars. This Prime Minister isn't worth the cost after 8 years, and his NDP Liberal government couldn't be more out of touch. So who got rich and where did the missing millions go?
Who got rich? Who got rich? Yeah, it's going to go out of hand. That nut, Jamie Baker, has to speak, and the place goes nuts.
Yes for an answer. Independent officers of Parliament are investigating. A third-party review of the allegations is underway, and we're committed to ensuring organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to fighting climate change and drawing in investments from around the world, we have a plan, we have a focus on doing it in the right ways that's going to grow the economy and support Canadians. The Conservatives have no plan whatsoever. All they can do is try and play partisan political games.
The Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
The Minister of Industry for 35 months as minister on this file, and the Prime Minister's handpicked chair of the Green Slush Fund admitted last night that she tried to get $2.2 million of taxpayer money funneled to the Visharian Centre Vanity Project from the fund she chairs. Then she got the employees of the Slush Fund to get another $10 million for the Visharian Vanity Project from Liberal ministers. She took the money and ran. Visharian claimed that was being an entrepreneur. We're calling it grifting. Why did the Prime Minister let his green slush fund chair abuse the taxpayer for personal gain?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Minister has already addressed this question, and investigations are underway. But the work we are doing on fighting climate change is already cutting pollution while building a strong and competitive economy. While we work to advance our ambitious climate action, the Conservative Party has no plan because fighting climate change simply doesn't matter to them. The Conservative leader is turning his back on future generations on both environment and economy by refusing to commit to Canada's targets like his mentor Stephen Harper did when he withdrew from the Kyoto Accords.
Shameful.
We're going to have Deputy.
Man, these
Adequate
people.
housing for Indigenous peoples have been neglected by Conservatives and Liberals. Thanks to the NDP, a for Indigenous by Indigenous housing strategy will now help First Nations, Métis, and Inuit to find adequate homes away from their home communities. But there is still work to do. Territorial governments like Nunavut are still waiting on this government to deliver funding for homes for their residents. Why are the Liberals always delaying critical funding for housing in the territories?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've demonstrated time and time again how committed we are to address housing gaps in Indigenous communities swiftly, effectively, and in equal partnership. Since 2016, we've supported the construction and renovation of over 30,000 homes in First Nations communities. We launched the $4 billion urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy, despite the Conservative Party voting to cut this essential funding. We will continue working with partners to co-develop and implement community-based housing solutions.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Edmonton families are making tough choices this winter. Put food on the table or buy Christmas presents for their kids. But who's stealing Christmas this year? Is it Scrooge? Is it the Grinch? No, it's the
Coalition
Liberal
breakdown.
Conservative Corporate Coalition. They've let their
What?
grocery CEO friends jack up prices to make record profits while Canadians turn to food banks for Christmas
always wears a
dinner.
bolo.
Why is the government okay with letting grocery CEOs ruin the winter?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've actually taken real actions to hold grocery CEOs to account with more competition, because more competition means lower prices, more choice, and more innovative products and services for Canadians. Our affordability legislation will empower the Competition Bureau to hold grocers accountable and prioritize consumers' interests. The Fall Economic Statement proposes further amendments to the Competition Act to crack down on predatory pricing and better respond to anti-competitive mergers and more. We're ensuring Canadians have more competitive options, and we're limiting excess profits by corporations at the expense of Canadians.
That's right. Here.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is a Prime Minister who said veterans were asking for more than he could give. He sued them in court after he said he never would.
Sued the veterans,
He's
right?
caused the homelessness that he just talked about, and he spends the money on more bureaucracy instead of on our veterans. Now, he asked how much that the Carleton mushroom farms is spending on gas. He says they're spending too much. I have their bill records here, Mr. Speaker. In November alone, it was $11,866, prorated to about $100 grand a year, which he wants to quadruple to $400 grand a year. Once again, should the farm raise prices on consumers or cut production so polluting foreign farms get the business?
See, that's the real question.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Right? You guys
Mr.
know
Speaker,
this. I know that. But
average
it's still frustrating to
farm
watch.
family, the average farm in Canada pays far less, around 1% of what that very successful farm is paying. Because the reality is 97% of farm fuel emissions are already exempt from the price on pollution. That is why we are continuing to move forward with programs and supports to encourage farms across the country, particularly very successful farms, to look at ways to reduce their emissions as they move forward into a net zero future.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So that's his attitude now. Remember when he called small businesses wealthy tax cheats? Now he accuses the Carleton mushroom farm of being too successful. Therefore, they need to pay higher taxes. He clearly has no idea about our food supply chain because, of course, grains have to be dried, and the fuels for drying are now taxed. Barns have to be heated. Those barns, that heating, are now taxed. There's a common sense Conservative bill to axe the tax on those farmers to lower the price of the food. But if he doesn't believe that this tax costs farmers, will he sit down with the Madero's Carleton mushroom farm and inspect their bill personally?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government reached out and will continue to reach out to a range of farmers across the country who want to reduce their emissions, who are concerned about climate change, who want to preserve our land for future generations, who understand, unlike these MAGA conservatives, that there is no choice anymore between protecting the environment and growing the economy. While the Conservatives want to take us back to the Stone Age, we're going to continue to invest in supporting farms, supporting businesses, supporting Canadians while we reduce our pollution, reduce our emissions, and build a stronger future for everyone.
Trudeau should go net zero like Trevor says. That'd be so we don't have to see him at all.
His targets, except for the 1 year when the Canadians were locked down. His own Environment Commissioner says that he will come nowhere near meeting his 2030 targets. And now Canada ranks 58th out of 64 on the Climate Performance Index. So his tax is not working. And nor does he seem to understand how food arrives. Food doesn't come from the grocery store, Mr. Speaker. The average farmer in Canada has to spend $150,000 on his carbon tax for barns and drying, and that all has to go to the consumers. Won't he pass our common sense bill to axe the tax on food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we took office 8 years ago, Canada had no plan to reach even its very modest, the Harper government's even very modest environmental targets. We not only have surpassed the Harper targets, we put in place new ambitious targets that we are very much on track to meeting, Mr. Speaker. We have decreased our emissions over the past 2 years faster than any other G7 country, and we will continue to lead the way on demonstrating saying that you cannot have a plan for the future of the economy if you don't have a plan to fight climate change. That's what we're doing. That's what they are not.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he is wrong on the facts. Under the previous Conservative government, we actually reduced emissions while growing the economy. We did it through technology and not taxes. This Prime Minister, by the way, I said earlier that Canada ranked 58th out of 64. There's a new publication of the ranking, and Canada is now 62nd.
Went down. We got even worse. And for what?
The tax,
Why?
the worst the ranking. So
we can't afford
will the
groceries
Prime
or
Minister finally get rid of his tax plan and come up with an environment plan?
Poilievre's doing a great job today.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I don't know if I have the patience to do what they do.
We are on track
He
to
does.
surpass Harper government's 2030 target, and the latest emissions projections show Canada is on track to achieving our government's new, ambitious, and achievable 2030 climate goal. Our plan is working. We're seeing companies around the world invest in Canada. We were the third largest country in terms of foreign direct investment in the world earlier this year.
China buying up all the houses in Vancouver.
Leadership on fighting against climate change. But that party continues to vote against measures to support our farmers, measures to invest in a cleaner economy, measures to protect Canadians and their economy from the challenges of the future. We will be there for Canadians.
I do trust Canadians and their common sense that if they are aware that this is going on, or just saw it, they'd be like, oh, he's lying.
On housing affordability to double housing costs. We have fewer homes per capita than we did when he took office, the fewest homes of any country in the G7. He doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, doubled the needed down payment, to the point where the Bank of Canada reports this week that Canada has the worst housing affordability in 41 years. And Rent.ca reveals that it's now more expensive to rent one room in a shared apartment than it was 8 years ago to rent the entire apartment for oneself. Mr. Speaker, when will he realize that ballooning inflation and the bureaucracy doesn't build homes?
Thank you very much, Dan. That's not necessary, but
Mr.
appreciate it. Thank you very
when will
much.
the leader of the official opposition understand that voting against the construction of 71,000 new homes through the apartment construction loan program is not going to help anyone? That voting against the construction of 12,000
Look at Anita
new
Anand.
homes
She
through
barely
the
can
Rapid
keep her eyes
Housing
open.
Initiative will not help Canadians. He chose to play partisan games last night in trying to shut down this House through a MAGA-inspired approach, while we continue to stand up for Canadians and deliver on the things they need. While they play partisan games, we will continue to fight.
Look at all the Liberals right now. They look sedated. Look at the Liberals. They look like they're under the influence.
Mr. Speaker, Maclean's magazine reports, and I quote, 2 jobs, no money, how mortgage rates have pushed one Toronto father to the brink. And I quote, 2 years into our mortgage, their bi-weekly payments have reached $2,268, now paying more than $5,000 a month to live in a 900 square foot townhouse, and $3,500 of that goes to interest. Mr. Speaker, all of his spending programs have doubled the cost of housing, and according to Bank of Nova Scotia, have boosted interest rates another 2%. Will he realize the damage he's doing in causing Canadians unsupportable and sustainable mortgage?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize the challenges Canadians are facing, and on this side of the House, we've chosen to invest to support them, to create new affordable housing, to create new apartments. But, Mr. Speaker, as much as the Leader of the Opposition loves to rise in this House to talk about Canadians and suffering, he will not rise in this House to support solutions to Canadians' challenges.
Who is he trying to convince right now?
To vote against 71,000 new rental homes through the apartment construction loan program. He rose in this House to vote against 12,000 new affordable homes through the Rapid Housing Initiative. He likes to instrumentalize Canadians. He won't solve for them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Voted against an approach that has spent $87 billion on affordable housing to double the cost of housing. He thinks that if he's expensive, he's excused for his failures. Mr. Speaker, failing is bad. Failing expensively is
Great
even
point.
worse. Our common sense plan would require cities permit 15% more housing as a condition of getting their financing, give them bonuses if they beat the target, link the dollars they get for transit to requirements for apartments around them, and sell off 6,000 federal buildings and thousands of acres of federal land to build, build, build. Why can't he get behind that common sense plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
goof.
inflation has gone up, interest rates have gone up, food prices have gone up, energy prices.
Listen to what he's saying.
All linked to the ongoing war that Russia is waging in Ukraine.
Do you believe that? Do you believe any of that?
On this side of the
'Cause
House.
I don't.
And we are
Like-
acting not just to bring down prices here at home, but to stand with Ukraine in our fight against Russia. Unfortunately, the leader of the official opposition, who referred to Ukraine as a faraway land, refused
It is far away.
to deliver for Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always be there for Ukraine.
Maybe you wouldn't think it's far away if you fly 60,000 kilometers like in a month, but Ukraine is very far away.
Leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's not there for Ukraine, he's there for himself. When conservatives demanded that the government provide lethal weapons before Putin's invasion, when they most needed them,
breaks
he
him down.
said no. When conservatives kicked Putin out of the G8, made it the G7, he said no. And what he said yes to giving Putin an exported, big, powerful turbine to pump his gas and fill his war chest.
It's
and
tearing him up.
export detonators used for Russian mines that blow up Ukrainians, Mr. Speaker. That's not there for Ukrainians. We will stand for Ukrainians and for Canadians.
Proof is in the pudding, man. And what he just said, I don't know that all of that is factually correct. I bet you most of it is, because it's history, not future. And so it's harder to lie about the past than the future, right? It gets out of hand now. Watch what happens next. I'm pretty sure what happens next is this nut, Yvonne Baker, who must be from Ukraine.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr.
Not
Speaker,
yet.
I am delighted to find ourselves in an argument about which side of the House is more supportive of Ukraine, because one of the strengths that Canada
burying
has had
himself.
on the
He's
world
just
stage
lying.
these past difficult 2 years is that we've said there is no debate around support in Ukraine in Canada like there is in other countries where MAGA-inspired far-right movements are undermining supports for Ukraine. The Conservative
Shame
Party
on
of
them,
Canada
man.
has an opportunity to reverse its position in opposing the Ukraine free trade deal that Zelensky is asking for. Will they vote in favor of Ukraine?
What? Oh my goodness, guys, right? Like, it can't be just me that finds that off-putting to watch. Like, you have to watch it to find out, like, how bad it is, but there's no debate on the support of Ukraine, a country halfway around the world? I've got nothing against Ukrainians, like, or I don't have anything against anybody, but I've got some problems with Trudeau and his cabinet these days. Like, and this nut, Von Baker's crazy.
We know the Ukrainians.
Yeah, we get stalled up on Mr. Speaker here for minutes.
Very far away from the Speaker. The Speaker would like to hear the member. The Honourable Member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been clear on where we stand on the war in Ukraine. We understand that Ukrainians are not just fighting for their own freedom and survival, but that they're also fighting for us and that we need to be fighting for them.
Why would they be fighting for us? Why are they fighting for us? They're fighting for our grocery prices? They're fighting for our housing costs? What are they fighting for in the Ukraine for Canada? Like, again, I'm watching so much of this that I'm getting educated, and they can't just talk bullshit. Like, what is Ukraine doing to support Canadians in our tough time?
He's asking his question. I see that there are members on the other side of the House who are having trouble hearing the question. I invite the member for Etobicoke Centre to restart their question.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been clear as to where we stand on the war in Ukraine. We understand that the Ukrainian people are not just fighting for their own freedom and survival, but that they're also fighting for us, and that we need to be fighting for them.
How are they fighting for us? Again, how are they fighting for us? Like, I don't know if the people from Ukraine could find Canada on the map. I don't know how many Canadians could find Ukraine on the map, but
to keep it down so that we could have this question asked.
And again, I'm not angry at Ukrainians, but the politics of it is angering. Like,
Mr. Speaker, it is clear where our government stands on Ukraine. We understand that the Ukrainian people are not only fighting for their own freedom and survival, but they're also fighting for us, and that we need to be fighting for them. It is also clear where Conservative MPs stand. Their leader has never advocated for more military, financial, or humanitarian support for Ukraine. They voted against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, and yesterday, the leader of the Conservative Party dismissively referred to Ukraine as a faraway foreign land. Under this leader, Conservative...
Colleagues, I notice that members will wait until I've actually recognized a member to then start heckling again. I'm asking once again, please. And if members are going to have the ability to heckle, then please have the way to identify yourselves who are heckling and not leaning back to try to cover your face.
he's calling them cowards. Like, listen, do you hear that? This weird time is kind of the highlight of the whole. I mean, there was a lot of great questions, and Poilievre lit them up.
Member from Etobicoke Centre, so that we all can get back to the business of doing the people's work.
Did you hear what he said about, like, don't be leaning back, acting like you didn't do it?
From the top.
Mr. Speaker, our
Chris Donchma. How about that? How much time are they going to give this clown to say the same shit? Goodness gracious.
It is also clear now where Conservative MPs stand. Their leaders never advocated for more military, financial, humanitarian support for Ukraine. They voted against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, and yesterday, the leader of the Conservative Party referred dismissively to Ukraine as a far-away foreign land. Under this leader,
that fool behind Baker is from nearby. Bloy. I just hope other Canadians see this, like, and see it for what it is. Like, the way that things are here now, we should be more focused on here and now.
They hate it when we talk about Ukraine. I thank the member for Etobicoke Centre for his leadership in supporting Ukraine. The Conservative Party yet again showed Ukrainians and all Canadians who they really are. When it came time to support military aid to Ukraine, they voted against. When it came time to support
they're doing this thing.
Operation Unifier, they voted against. When it came to the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, twice they voted against. While the Conservative leader is...
Check out how bad Gary's timing is. I have trouble saying Gary's last name, Adesanya. He can't keep a rhythm. Right? What country are we from, everybody? Like, I do care about the people at my grocery store. I care about, like, the people in traffic. This federal government doesn't seem to care about the reality that we're facing out here.
Mr. Speaker, even though small businesses are dealing with a cost of living crisis, the Liberals are forcing them to pay back the Canada Emergency Business Account loan within the next few weeks, or risk losing up to $20,000. And while the Liberals put small businesses in jeopardy, they're handing out $21.6 billion to their rich consultant friends. Reducing this out-of-control outsourcing by just 4% more would cover the cost of extending the CEBA. So instead of choosing rich CEOs and highly paid consultants, will the Liberals support small businesses by extending the CEBA by just 1 year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, we stepped up with unprecedented supports for small businesses. We were there to support them. We were there to invest in them. We were there to support Canadian workers, Canadian families, Canadian seniors. We were there with supports that saw us through this pandemic with fewer deaths and a stronger economy than most of our peers. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, we were there to help Canadians through the pandemic, and we're going to continue to support small businesses in many different ways. But the pandemic is over in its acute phase. We will continue to be there to support people, but pandemic supports needed to end.
The Honourable Member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, despite climate negotiations being captured by fossil fuel,
I've got a question about Mike Morris I don't know the answer to. Does he have a Tourette's or something? Because something weird happens here at the end of his question.
This government continues to do the opposite, wasting over $1,200 on behalf of each and every Canadian taxpayer to expand the TMX pipeline and increasing oil production to record levels. Why is it this PM can't find the money to ensure we end legislated poverty for people with disabilities, but has tens of billions of dollars for a leaky pipeline?
Yeah, because like I would normally tease something like that, but he might have an ailment or something, right? Like, or just bad gas. I don't know.
Demonstrated yet again its leadership on the world stage with ambitious leadership in putting a cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector, on recognizing that we do need to get to a net zero economy, and we need to support all our industries, including our energy industry, in moving towards that. We will be there to support workers in the energy industry as we focus on decarbonization. We will be there to support businesses across this country as they shift to lower emitting technologies. We understand the process it takes. We will accompany Canadians every step of the way, and we will get to net zero.
Whatever.
And that brings to an end.
And that brings us to an end.
I see
He ran out of gas, guys. He ran out of gas. Thank goodness. Well. The shows are exciting. Like the question periods are exciting because I'm learning more about it, and now I do have a side, and it's our side. It's not the Conservative side. It's not the Liberal side. It's not any of those sides. It's our side as Canadians. And Canadians, I think, the people that are going to be watching anything that I'm making are going to realize that change is necessary. And it's not about this government or that one, but I think we've got a bunch of crooks in our federal government right now. In the cabinet, what is going on? How can it be so bad out there? And they're like, no, we're going to stick to our plan of taxing people more and having everything go to levels of unaffordability that we'll never be able to recover from. But I'm Ehren, and we're having fun here with Canadian politics. We are learning. We've got to get the message out. Again, just that change is necessary. I think if an average Canadian saw what just took place, they'd be like, oh, our federal government is steering us in the wrong direction, and there is an alternative that seems to have a better plan. Even if the Conservatives had no plan, which they do have plans, even if they had no plan, it's better than a bad plan. Like, right? Anyhow, we're going to wrap up. It's always a blast hanging out with you guys. We've got some more things that we've got to get done this evening to get ready for later on. Love hanging out. I'm sorry when I do the bookends, or the beginning and the end of the show, I don't really see the chat as much. I do like that part, though. It's awesome. Thanks again, Dan. That's cool. That's unnecessary, though. But thank you, nonetheless. That's it. Ehren, Question Period Canada. We have fun here all the time. We make lots of videos. We do live Senate question periods too. They're quite a bit different than the setting of the Commons. Like it's just a different mood and form, but it's just different in that chamber. It's interesting too. Lots of other videos. Check out my shorts. Even if you don't like shorts, you might like mine. I work hard at those too. Anyway, we'll catch you later. Thanks for hanging out. Remember to have something healthy to eat and try to stay warm.